I think that volunteering in the soup kitchen, in the prison, I recognized that this is the way the Lord wanted to use me. And it brought me out into a place where I could go up to a total stranger that looked like they were hurting and say, "You look like you're hurting. Could you like to have a hug?" And I'd give them a hug. And you'd be just surprised at the number of people out there that need hugs and what a hug will do. So that's kind of my story. I became known as a hugger.
We have a good friend who changed our name from Hegemeister to the Hegemeisters.
It's rare these days to see a marriage that's lasted almost 70 years. It's also rare when that marriage has been a partnership between two people whose qualities support and complement each other's. Meeting House Village residents Lynn and Ginny Hegemeister provide inspiration for anyone planning a journey through life with another, as well as demonstrating what it means to serve others with grace. Relocation during childhood brought them both to the Denver, Colorado area, where Lynn's grandfather had been a key leader in developing the city of Fort Collins. Lynn and Ginny met in high school, but after graduation, as it often happened with those of the greatest generation, World War II delayed their marriage for 3 years.
Well, we went together in high school. Lynn went off to college, and we graduated in 1941 in June. And of course, we went to war in 41 in December. And Lynn was in a military school anyway. And so we got engaged when he came back. We had gone together as seniors in high school. And when he came back on home before he went off or went into the service, why, we got engaged, and then in 1944 we got married.
Lynn's earliest ambition was to be a pilot, so shortly after the U.S. entered the war in 1941, he interrupted his college education to enlist with the Army Air Corps and graduated as a fighter pilot in 1944. He and Ginny were married that year, but Lynn spent the next 2 years with the 368th Fighter Group in Germany, flying P-47 Thunderbolts.
After the war began, I was at Texas A&M in college when the war began, and I realized that it was time for me to get involved. And so I enlisted in the Army Air Corps. Then I was called to active duty in March of '43. So I had not been at home where Jenny was for quite some time. And after I graduated from flying school then and had my wings and my commission, I went home pretty proud of what had happened in my life. And I thought, now's the time for me to really make an impression on Jenny. Jenny called me one day and she says, "I think it's time we got married." And because we thought that my overseas time was imminent. And she ended up in Richmond and we got married. From a child, I had always wanted to be doing something in aviation. So when the war came along, and I had the opportunity then to decide where to serve, there wasn't any choice but the Air Corps. So that was a grand experience for me, doing something that I had always wanted to do, even though it took a war to bring it about. And I came home unscathed, no bullet holes, and that was good. So I came back whole to Ginny. So then Ginny and I then began to build what became a really good life.
After the war, Lynn and Ginny began building their life together. He graduated from college with a degree in civil engineering, a vocation that would guide his career until retirement. Ginny spent many years with the County Extension Service in Greenlee. A highlight of their lives came in 1957, when they adopted a 4-week-old daughter, Lisa Lynn. Over time, their careers brought them to New England.
Well, I was unable to have children, and we had a real void in our life. We wanted one. And so we were living in Colorado, and we put in for adoption, being told that it would be at least 2 years. It was just a few months after we applied that they called one night from Denver, when we lived in Greeley, and said, "We have a 4-week-old baby girl here. Would you like to come and get her?" So we called my mother and we said, "We're going to Denver to get a 4-week-old baby." She is a joy and just a part of our lives. She belongs to us and we belong to her.
While always busy with work and family, Lynn and Ginny served as volunteers in some of the neediest of human settings. Ginny served often in local soup kitchens and later as a mentor at a women's prison in New Hampshire. Similarly, Lynn was certified as a lay pastor and served as a men's prison chaplain in recent years.
Ginny had the opportunity to become a volunteer tutor in county jail, helping inmates learn to read. And she said, "You got to come and do this with me." And together then we began prison ministry in a county jail in a little old classroom. So we would teach for maybe 30 minutes, and then we'd talk about Jesus for 30 minutes. And some of the men said, "Can't you start a Bible study in here so we can know what you're talking about?" And so we began to do that. And that led into about 25 years of our volunteering together in county jail and state prisons, Ginny with the women and me with the men. We just had a grand relationship as co-workers in the Lord's work in these places where there were people who just needed someone who would hug them once in a while. And Ginny would hug, and they'd tell us that we couldn't go in there and hug. No hugging in this prison. And we said, well, if we can't hug, we can't do what we do. And so they turned their heads and let us hug.
Residents of Meeting House Village since early 2011, Lynn and Ginny's profile in grace makes them a privilege for us to know, live with, and serve.
Learn to trust the Lord. Trust the Lord in all ways. It was after we let the Lord into our hearts that we really began to know how we ought to live, how we ought to relate with other people.
I think our long marriage career is truly a work of God. We couldn't have done it. And so that is really, I think, the story of our life is once we became Christians, everything changed, including us, new creations in Christ.